Good afternoon. It is an honor and a privilege to be participating in this session. St. Helena is an isolated island in the South Atlantic Ocean and lies east of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, about 1,000 miles from the coast of Angola. I would like to take this opportunity to share a couple of examples of what we are doing on St. Helena in respect of ecosystem-based adaptation. Our island's blue and green agenda includes a variety of work streams to help the community adapt to climate change, whilst contributing to climate mitigation, biodiversity, conservation, environmental protection, and sustainable development efforts. A number of these work streams comprises projects which use nature as a critical component to scaling up climate change, adaptation, and resilience measures. Our blue agenda includes the management of our marine environment. We have designated our entire 200 nautical mile EEZ as an IUCN Category 6 marine protected area that allows sustainable use of its natural resources. Our MPA contains globally significant marine biodiversity as is being managed through implementation of a marine management plan. In putting in place management strategies, we needed to ensure all use were being managed, including fishing, diving, marine interaction, marine developments, sand extraction, and also managing any potential risks or threats from climate change, invasive species, or pollution. We wanted to allow activities such as tourism, commercial and recreation fishing, diving, sand extraction to take place, but with the right balance to enable St. Helena to thrive both culturally and economically. We wanted to ensure that these strategies were based on robust evidence, ensuring that our rich biodiversity and unique ecosystems would be conserved and protected, in particular our rare, endangered, and globally significant endemic and native species. We also want to ensure that our natural resources are used sustainably and that our community would reap the benefits. Legislation has been developed to include licensing of fishing and marine tourism interaction activities. Marine and fisheries research and restrictions is in place to include total allowable catches by species and minimum size fish catches for various species. Marine and fishery science programs are in place to inform policy and management actions that underpins licensing for the use of our marine protective area. During this process, we knew what we wanted, but we were not sure where the resources would come from to implement our vision. Along came the UK government flagship Blue Belt programme, dedicated to marine conservation in the UK overseas territories, which provide access to funding, scientific and legal expertise. Key to the success of this project has been the involvement of key stakeholders within the local community. It is true to say this was not always an easy process, especially for the fishers and the marine tourism operators who were concerned with what the impact would be on their livelihoods. However, through continued engagement, I'm pleased to say that we now have the full support of our fishers and marine tourism operators who now play a key role in the monitoring of our marine environment. The fishers log the catches, measure the fish caught, and even suggested an increase in the minimum size catches of certain species, whilst the marine tourism operators have now participated in training to become accredited. Ecosystem-wide adaptation measures for marine protective area is key to effectively and sustainably manage the ongoing pressures and threats on our marine environment. Key to this management for long-term sustainability is ongoing community support and informing them of how our MPA will be managed through the implementation of our marine management plan. To recognize this important ongoing project, less than a month ago, on the 13th of November, our marine protective area was recognized by the International Marine Conservation Organization, Mission Blue, as a hope spot, one of just 156 in the world. Hope spots are recognized as special places, being areas of ocean that are scientifically identified for their uniqueness and, most importantly, their community's contributions and efforts in maintaining or improving global oceans health. A green example of our ecosystem-based adaptation is St. Helena's cloud forest restoration, a nature-based solution for water security and conservation of our unique biodiversity. The Peaks National Park is St. Helena's cloud forest and occupies the highest ground on St. Helena, which is visible from and provides views over much of the island. It provides a unique experience in the heart of the island for local and visitors alike. The overseas territory is home to 94% of UK's endemic biodiversity, a third of which is on St. Helena. The cloud forests alone support 17% of this total. Many of our species are on the edge of extinction and are under continual pressure from introduced invasive flora and fauna. The high elevation and native cloud forest vegetation of the Peaks National Park make an ideal combination for the interception of moisture-laden air that crosses the island, making appropriate management of the cloud forests critically important for the water security of the island. The island has a very high dependency on mist capture to continually replenish water supplies. In 2021, the UK government provided funding for the Cloud Forest Restoration Project, the last remaining ancient cloud forests on UK soil. This project will increase the island's water supply by up to a fifth and improve St. Helena's resilience to climate change. Habitat restoration is key to preventing extinction of many endemic species. Over 120 species have their entire global population in the small remaining habitat fragments in the St. Helena cloud forests. Combining techniques developed and honed over nearly 3 decades with a novel public-private partnership, hydrological expertise, and restoration methods ready to scale, the St. Helena Cloud Forest project represents a unique nature-based solution for increasing the island's resilience in water security. It also represents a global model for restoring cloud forests, which are rich in biodiversity and vital for water security. This project of scaling up adaptation activities across the cloud forests is underpinning resilience of its ecosystem and will safeguard an internationally important wildlife hotspot from further extinctions, increase cloud forest habitat by 25%, boost the water supply, and support the sustainable development of our island through ecotourism. I hope that this brief intervention gives you an insight to what we are doing on St. Helena towards ecosystem-based adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Okay, for those of you who are new here, my name is Abiel Leons, one of the MCs for today, and I would like to introduce you to our moderator for this session, Stacey Alvarez de la Campa, the Community Manager here at Island Innovation. She'll be leading our discussion. Let's welcome to the stage, Stacey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this session this afternoon after lunch. We've all had lunch. We should all be settled and happy and ready to focus. So this is great. I love these sessions. Thanks so much for making it out here today. And our session today is called Restoring Our Future, Scaling Up Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. Now, nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation, as we have heard from our esteemed minister in her incredible keynote address, they have developed into workable and unique solutions for many island communities who need to create a sustainable economic structure and boost their biodiversity. So this panel features experts in their field who are going to work with restoration, conservation, and to protect ecosystems. As Abia or MC mentioned, I'm Stacey Alvarez de la Campa. I am the Partnerships Manager at Island Innovation, and I'm also the lead facilitator of our Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy. We will have some members of that cohort doing a really great session tomorrow and Friday. We'd love if you could join us then. So I'd like to welcome our speakers to the stage at this point in time. We do have Mr. Sam Teacher, the co-founder of Coral Vita, should be joining us. Also, Mr. Christian Telecki, the CEO of Flora and Fauna. We also have Dr. Penny Langhammer of Rewild. She's the Executive Vice President. And we also have Mr. Simon Dent, I believe, of Mirova Natural Capital. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay. There's one more. Oh, yes, Cynthia Bardusa. How could I forget? I apologize, Bardusa. Of Ocean Action. Please join us on the stage. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Okay, thank you. So I'd love for each of our 5 panelists to just introduce themselves briefly, starting over with this gentleman here on my left. Please feel free to introduce yourself, sir, and you can pass the mic.
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Simon Dent, and was the founder and principal of the Sustainable Ocean Fund. And this was a blue economy emerging markets fund that was launched really in the middle of 2018, so it was fairly first generational at its time. It raised $132 million and basically is now fully deployed into 15 projects in 12 different countries. And so what we have done here is, I think, shown a pathway to the fact that you can make credible return-seeking investments into the blue economy. And I think on the back of the Sustainable Ocean Fund, we now have a number of different types of blue economy and ocean funds in all areas of the capital stack. And I think that's really interesting and obviously is very beneficial for driving private finance, particularly into the blue economy sector.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Langhammer, you're next. Thank you.
Sure. I think we're missing a panelist, though, who's sitting in the front row, KM Reyes.
Oh, I apologize. Please come up again. We'll get a chair for you immediately.
Hi, my name is Penny Langhammer. I'm the Executive Vice President at Rewild, a conservation organization based in the U.S. We work in over 80 countries globally to protect and restore the wild as the most effective solution for addressing the climate, biodiversity, and human well-being crises. And I'm going to talk a bit about island-ocean connections and restoration in this panel today. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Christian Teleke. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Fauna and Flora. Fauna and Flora is the oldest conservation organization in the world. We were founded in 1903. You may not know that. We're based in the UK headquarters, but we're in 46 countries, and we have about 700 people around the world that are working exclusively with community-led and community-based organizations. And so that's our real modus operandi. I joined in July of this year. So I am getting my feet under the table, and I think for the purposes of this conversation, I want to say that you know, I'm a Canadian who grew up in Toronto. I spent a lot of time on islands, but I'm not from islands. So it's important to give you a little bit of context. And a lot of what I do is tell the stories of my incredible colleagues who are on the ground. And I've just come back from Nicaragua with a team that we have there, about 20, that are doing some incredible things with some challenging circumstances. So I'm going to be telling a little bit of their story, and hopefully I'll do it justice, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of context in terms of what I'm going to say with you this afternoon. But it's a great pleasure to be on this panel with you all. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Sam Teicher. I'm the co-founder and chief reef officer of Coral Vita. And we are a for-profit, for-good, for-nature company that's working to scale reef restoration around the world. So I have a job that shouldn't exist. Shouldn't be living in a world where we need to grow corals to bring them back to life, but that's where we are. And so we are working to use good science, work with communities, but also apply a commercial model with land-based coral farms to help scale up impact. And we were the inaugural winners of Prince William's Revive Our Oceans Earthshot Prize. Just opened up a coral farm here in Dubai, which hopefully y'all can come visit. And it's also nice to be sitting next to another Earthshot Prize winner.
So thank you for having me. And yeah, Earthshot, yeah, that was exciting back in the day. Right now, my new position, I'm the Director of Ocean Action 2030. We're not as old as Christians, Flora and Fauna, but we've been around since 2020 to deliver on sustainable ocean planning. This is an initiative that it's connected with the Ocean Panel, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy made up of 18 leading countries that have been working towards precisely what we're probably going to talk a bit about more, ecosystem-based solutions based in the ocean, sustainable management. So their headline is to have 100% sustainable ocean management throughout sustainable ocean plans. So I'm very excited to be here today to speak a bit about how we could have ocean-based solutions, how we could have ecosystem-based solutions, place-based solutions, but also locally led and country-led solutions through sustainable ocean planning. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Cam, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm KM Reyes. So I hold several hats, but mainly for today it's Center for Sustainability PH. So I'm from Palawan Island in the Philippines, and we're a frontline rainforest conservation organization working to protect the last 3% of our remaining rainforests through legal establishment of protected areas. And I'm also with the global reforestation charity One Tree Planted, and I manage our reforestation portfolio across the Asia Pacific.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Just a round of applause to our panelists again, and I'm going to jump into some questions for everyone. Well, Cam, I'm definitely going to start with you because I looked you up and I saw that you were a National Geographic Explorer, and I thought, oh yeah, because when I was a little girl, that was one of my favorite magazines. I will not date myself by saying I actually read them as magazines. So, as an explorer, you must have seen firsthand the richness of ecosystems. So, in that light, what do you consider to be one of the most important reasons to promote ecosystem-based adaptation?
So, as a frontline organization, it's extremely challenging and at the same time extremely rewarding. The Philippines, I've got a couple of stats here. So, yeah, I'm from the Philippines, which according to the World Risk Index in 2022 was the #1 highest disaster risk country globally. And according to the Global Climate Risk Index, the 4th most affected country in the last decade to 2019 after Haiti. So, ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solutions, these are actually all things that frontline communities have been doing since time immemorial. And so for us, it's not just something that's here spoken about at these global conferences, but actually something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. A few years ago, we were in a very big typhoon in the Philippines. I spent 24 hours quite terrified. Going through a scale 7 typhoon, and I lost my roof. So it was, I really was under threat. So for us, specifically in Palawan, it's so important not just to do the work, but to get the support out there.
Thank you so much for that insight. We appreciate it. When you mention going through the typhoon and losing your roof, yes, I've been through similar things. I come from a large ocean island state of Barbados and been through the exact same thing. So thank you for being here, and thanks for your insights. So I'd like to move on to Mr. Dent. Can you tell us a little bit about the concept of natural capital? Because I was captivated by the name of this fund, Mirova Natural Capital. What role does this concept play in creating sustainable economic structures in islands?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I grew up in New Zealand, diving and sailing, and I spent 14 years in investment banking, and I thought that was enough. And essentially, basically, all I could see was that there was lots of money going to terrestrial conservation, forestry, and that's not. Of course, it's a good cause, but there was basically little or nothing going towards, ocean conservation or even blue economy, or trying to make that work in a sustainable manner. So what we put together was the concept of actually investing in the blue economy, and the blue economy is, I guess, a recent term, but essentially there's always been business on the sea, from the very beginning, and fishing is one of the oldest industries you have, and is basically one of the most significant even today in terms of actual dollars of revenue that are due to countries. So the concept of actually investing into blue economy and ocean businesses is not new, and so we're taking that concept and putting it together. And so what we have done is bring a full return fund, impact-led, targeted at emerging markets and delivering projects to try and create scale and sustainable business plans. And we need sustainability. I mean, it's important to basically make sure that business plans are economically viable, but they're also bringing a transition, so we have the sustainability piece there. And then we need to make sure that within that plan, we're creating an environmental return that is essentially measurable on our case. And then I think we then look to scale. So we can, on our fund, we can look to do relatively small tickets. So we're not a multilateral, we're not grant, but we're sitting at what we call the missing middle. So we're providing ticket sizes of around $1 million up to $15 million. But what we're really looking to is we make the initial investment. We're looking to see that project scale either in country or potentially regional. So that's how we look at it. We've invested in projects in marine protected areas in Belize. So that's a loan that's been put in place alongside a grant from the IUCN to make the cost of the project more blended and a lower cost. But we've also gone all the way up to looking at shipborne recycling in the Bahamas. And so essentially that's a fairly large project, $10 million plus. So those are the types of range of investments that we're looking to do.
Thank you for that insight. And I think it's great, the investment banking background. You're really showing us the relevance of financing to just about every aspect of conservation and even sustainability. We tend to think of them as two separate things, but from what you're saying, and when you use terms like environmental return, we see that financing is really at the heart of just about everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think you can be sustainable if you're not there in 5 years' time. So you need to essentially find a way to make sure that you're reinforcing your projects over time. So that's important.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Hi, Dr. Langhammer. Well, I'm fascinated by Rewild. Again, I did my research, and I was thinking to myself, what you're doing is it's always been relevant, and I think you're really bringing a presence to the space of ecosystem adaptation. So can you describe for us or outline what you consider to be, beyond climate resilience, what are some of the benefits of scaling up ecosystems beyond just looking at resilience?
Thank you. Well, protecting and restoring natural ecosystems is one of our most important and cost-effective strategies for dealing with this triple crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and human well-being. But I just want to pick up on something that my colleague said here about the amount of funding going into ocean conservation. We're seeing that increase, but where we still have a challenge is in driving resources to ridge to reef restoration, which I want to talk about. The importance of restoring from ridge to reef island ecosystems, not only for the dramatic impacts they can provide for the marine environment, which I'll talk about in a second, but also because of the adaptation and the livelihood resilience that brings. So we Rewild in partnership with Island Conservation. My colleague Penny Becker here will be on a later panel to describe this in more detail, and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography has really been focused on trying or launching this initiative called the Island Ocean Connection Challenge, which responds to this need for restoring island ecosystems and inspired by the science that's showing how dramatic the impacts can be on the marine environment from terrestrial island restoration. And so this is something that we really want to scale up and replicate, and we have a number of examples in islands where this work is underway. One that our organization is working on, Floriana in the Galapagos, one of the few inhabited islands of the Galapagos. The removal of invasive species is a very complicated endeavor there, but the community, it's really community driven, and they want to see this happen, and so we've been supporting them. And so the intention is to remove the invasive species, contain them, rewild the island. A lot of the species will come back on their own. Some of them will have to be reintroduced, but we've seen, elsewhere in the world how dramatic the impacts and how quick the impacts can be from island restoration work. We've also been involved in one in the Caribbean in partnership with Fauna and Flora on Redonda, where a restoration project started just in 2016 to remove the goats and rats from that island has led to like a 2,000% increase in the native vegetation. The 2 species of lizards that are endemic to that island, which are critically endangered on the brink of extinction, have rebounded. Recently, the government has just established the largest marine protected area around there in the Caribbean, so we're really expecting this will provide the opportunity for sustainable tourism. It's going to be, a major investment in the region. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the work that we've been doing, and Penny will go into more detail on that later.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, yes, we'd love to hear from you, Mr. Teleki. So you did mention community involvement, which I thought was fantastic, because we know none of this makes any sense without multi-stakeholder engagement and having any difference really filter to everyone who needs the help. So we'd love to hear more about that from you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ditch half my notes. It's covered. You've already covered some of this, but I want to cut to the chase on this because I think it's important. I talk about where I've just come from. And Minister, if you're still here, I thought you wonderfully framed you acknowledged the benefits of people and nature, but I thought really important you said it's hard. This is really hard, and you've got to commit to it, but the benefits are huge. So I just want to congratulate you on the progress you've made there. I think it's Islands represent a wonderful laboratory for how we can, be testing, but addressing problems that then can be scaled. And I think there's wonderful opportunities, and wonderful to get your words about the front line. I talk about as much as I can that if we're not getting down the resources, the tools, we are going to lose this battle, absolutely, on climate change and biodiversity loss. So fundamentally important. Can I just ask, has anyone been to Ometepe Island in Nicaragua? Anyone? So yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. So you approach this island that's in the middle of Lake Nicaragua. These two volcanoes rise and that dominate these islands, and they're connected between the two. And there on this island, you have a community group that we've been working with, and we work very much with indigenous groups, local communities, and we get invited in. We don't come in and say, this is what you should be doing. We get invited in. We sit down. We understand where they're at. We design projects that respond to their needs using their knowledge, and then we're there to support. We're a supporting act. And we've been working these geographies for many years, in some places 25 years, and working very much in partnership. Redonda Island, if you don't know about it, Google it. It's a fantastic example of what we can achieve in short amounts of time. But on this island, you've got a group that we've been working with called Bio-Ometepe. Bio-Ometepe. About 10 communities that are involved that have got 250 farmers on this island that have changed their practices. They have 95% of them, of those farmers, have reported an increase in their income. They are supportive of this and moving to climate smart agroforestry. They've reported a 97% increase in the biodiversity that they're seeing there. The statistics go on, and I think it's incredibly important that we demonstrate that that you can achieve these outcomes in a short amount of time in these geographies. One final point in terms of the success. It turns out the secret sauce in all the success are women. Yeah, no, absolutely. The women there were more receptive to change, to embracing technologies, and every farming cooperative that I met with on this island, the women were the spokesperson. The women had the ideas. They created the business plan. So there are some ways at which we could, the ways that we should be investing and thinking about this really from a local level. And I promise this is the final point, because I know I want to get into it and hear what our colleagues say here, is that, do go and sit with these communities. You can bypass a whole range of issues and problems if you just sit down with them and understand where they're at, identify a common destination, and go fast with them. So when you're talking about these locally adaptive, ecosystem-based adaptive solutions, they're going to be your best champion, your implementer, and the key to your success. So, thank you.
No, thank you for those insights. That's awesome. I think something that you brought out that's really important is the fact that the listening to local populations who have been there and lived it generation after generation, rather than going in to prescribe something. And then also the idea of including communities that are traditionally marginalized, like women and indigenous communities, because women, where I'm from, are often the stewards of places like mangroves and play a key role in that conservation effort. So thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, Mr. Teicher, we come to you. Please tell us some more about your activities. I know that you might call the undersea world your home more than here on land, which is good. So can you tell us a bit about your work with coral reef restoration, and how can you see that tying into economic resilience? Because a lot of people can't quite make that connection.
Thank you for that. And it's really great to be on this panel, I think also because the diversity of backgrounds, of interests, and in a sense, I think is very representative of just like how ecosystems themselves are complex. You've got climate, you've got water flow, you've got symbiosis between creatures. When we're talking about adaptation and resilience and restoring ecosystems, it also has this weave and thread of communities and investment and entrepreneurship and science and policy that need to be sort of brought together so we can all achieve the outcomes we really want to see, and of course, weaving in nature itself. So, yeah, I didn't think I was going to be a coral farmer growing up in Washington, D.C., what we're looking at, though, is that while, again, the best thing to do for reefs is to stop killing them, which requires everyone in the blue zone to, actually do their job. Even if we did live in a world where we got to 0 degrees warming, tomorrow the oceans are going to keep warming. And we're obviously not tracking towards 0 degrees. And so we need to protect ecosystems and empower communities, but we also need to vastly, rapidly upscale restoration and resilience. And so that's what we're working on, trying to create a new model where instead of the traditional approach to coral farming, which has got amazing practitioners from around the world, from the Philippines to the Bahamas to the Maldives, instead of just being reliant on a grant here and a fundraiser gala there, looking at how through tourism and coastal protection and fisheries, coral reefs and many ecosystems are incredibly valuable. There's 1 billion people around the world and 25% of marine life that depends on this single ecosystem. And the latest estimates are they generate $2.7 trillion a year. Not to mention cultural heritage, not to mention medicinal compounds that are used already to create drugs for viral infections, cancer, arthritis that come from coral reefs. But we've lost half the world's coral reefs since the 1970s, and we're on track to lose over 90% by 2050. So that's a tragedy, and that's infuriating, but it's also a direct threat to humanity. And so whether you're a hotel, a government, an insurance company, a developer, dying reefs would be a threat to your bottom line. So we sell restoration as a service to those customers to inject capital into funding large-scale impact. We develop technologies that not only can improve restoration outcomes, but also be licensed out to fund greater work. So our idea is let's create this mission-driven commercial model that hopefully will be successful for what we're doing, but hopefully other people can take and apply to mangroves and seagrass and other forms. Again, working with local communities is a core part of our model, using our farms as education centers for young people, for fishers, for government officials. And the last thing I'll also just mention, again, is in terms of the value of ecosystems. I also was in the Bahamas during Hurricane Dorian, which was the strongest storm ever to hit the country, and I don't advise staying for 25-mile-an-hour winds. We saw mangrove forests, in addition to the carbon sequestration, which everyone really wants to talk about, which is great, and the tourism benefits, and the water quality. Mangroves save people's lives. And so while we do need to value nature, and it's just the way the world works, and then to figure out how things can be investable and deployable, it's also tough to put an ROI on people's lives. But it's the truth that ecosystems, we rely on nature a lot more than nature relies upon us. And so we have the power to protect it and restore it and do a better job of taking care of it.
Thank you. I think we'll definitely always remember those words. We rely more on nature than nature relies on us, for sure. So thanks for that. We appreciate it. And we come to Ms. Cynthia Barduza. Thank you so much for joining us on the panel. And I really have enjoyed learning about your work. And I'd love to hear you give us some kind of an outline about the blue economy. It's been a bit of a buzzword, but in a lot of ways it carries a certain mystique, and people don't quite understand its relevance. Can you help us to just demystify the term blue economy a little bit in your experience?
Thank you for that wonderful question, because you open up a door for me to kind of answer so many things that I've been asked through COP. First of all, my background is I am from Costa Rica, and I used to work for the Costa Rican government. So I really understand how difficult it is to come to these COPs and to have these discussions and to be really, relieved on the results and to feel like we are making a difference. The thing is, the ocean is an ally. It's a no-brainer. It's so easy to basically, we have all the solutions there. Not only to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss, but also prosperity. Christian was mentioning the local communities, coastal communities. Sam has worked with them for quite a while, everyone probably here in this panel. And I had to work with them while I was working for the Costa Rican government. And once you know their needs are basically to be respected. So what I like most about what I do right now is the holistic approach. There needs to be a holistic approach that brings prosperity, preservation, production. So blue economy, it's a bit of all those flavors in together. The ocean started with sort of, the first solution was marine spatial planning. Let's do something about the uses of the ocean and let's use them sustainably. But then I think we needed to move and scale up a bit. And now I think the biggest challenge that we have is making the connections throughout the international frameworks. As you know, the ocean hasn't been in the center of the conversations of the UNFCCC. Back in Glasgow, I was Deputy Minister of Water and Ocean Affairs, but I was also negotiating because we were such a small group from Costa Rica. And we were discussing how to integrate the ocean into the conversation. Now we have the recurring dialogue, and this dialogue is the start, but we need more of this conversation. And we need to understand that sustainably managing the ocean is a solution to tackle climate change. We also need to connect through the new global biodiversity framework. So it's going to be difficult for the countries to protect 30% without considering the 100%. And you have to create jobs, you have to create opportunities, you have to protect. So it's quite difficult for governments, especially developing countries like mine, for example, like SEEDS that have such a huge pressure with climate change. So what I really like about the work that we're doing is basically it's a very tangible product that can actually help countries to basically understand the different conflict of uses, but it's about sustainable tourism that you were mentioning. It's also about conservation, but it's also about renewable energies. It brings everything into the equation as a whole, as it should be, and it also bridges with the different engagements and commitments that countries have through their NDCs. So sustainable ocean planning is quite essentially a tool that you can use to deliver on the MBC SAPs when it comes to global biodiversity framework, when it comes to committing through NDCs and committing through also national adaptation plans as well. I think in order to protect, we must also create this blue economy. We must de-risk the ocean. For that, de-risking the ocean means basically knowing what's out there, having it's about ocean accounting, it's about also understanding the benefits of all these natural assets. And you can only de-risk the ocean by basically planning the different uses of the ocean, and also being very strategic of where are you going to protect, how are you going to protect, and what are the benefits of this protection. So it's, I think to answer to your question, is where all these worlds kind of collide into one, and we don't get to do what we've been doing for quite a while, working in silos. We kind of have an integrated solution. It's very tangible in terms of most of these plans can be actually done in a year and a half. From the members of the Ocean Panel, 14 of them have committed to deliver their own sustainable ocean plans by 2025 and the rest by 2030. Just here at COP, a huge day for the ocean, 48 governments signed a declaration to sustainably manage 100% of their EEZs. I'm hoping for other countries to sign on this. It's absolutely amazing. It hasn't been very much, I don't think a lot of ocean folks really know about this yet, so I'm trying to say it everywhere I can, because there's so many things on the table that ocean still little but mighty, and I hope it becomes a bigger conversation during the COPs, climate COPs, and of course biodiversity COPs as well.
Thank you. I think that's great news that you mentioned about the EEZs. I could see Sam's eyes just kind of lit up when you heard that. So it's fantastic. And you mentioned something that I did hear kind of repeated throughout, the idea of economic resilience being linked to tourism, and it not being just enough, however, to protect reefs or protect the ocean anymore. We need to restore or biodiversity, so it's a matter of regenerating and regenerative tourism, so moving beyond that. I'd love to hear if any of you have anything to say about regenerative tourism or the role of tourism in economic resilience.
It's key, I think, and it's environmental and social. I'll use coral reefs as an example. Who's going to go spend a lot of money to go scuba diving and snorkeling if they want to see a coral reef and the coral reef's dead? And that doesn't just affect the hotel, that affects the taxi drivers and the restaurants and the airlines and the governments and obviously nature. And so there's a role also for those who do have the budgets, which does get closer to sort of private sector and hospitality together with governments and conservation finance, to then look at, okay, you could restore a reef off your property to bring in tourists, and nature-based tourism is only growing in popularity. Not to mention, again, that there's now coral restoration or mangrove restoration insurance policies, so you restore that reef to bring in tourists, and also you could see your premiums go down. I think there's a lot of good blended finance approaches. But then it's also, again, people and how you can create good jobs in those local communities that are tied to tourism. Our farms, as they are working coral farms, are also education centers and tourism attractions themselves. Give people the ability to walk right up to look at it. Like, again, anyone who wants to do so here in Dubai, Google the coffee lab, because our farm is so new we don't even have a pin yet. But again, the idea is that it's something people can experience. It's jobs that can be created in these communities. It ties to direct forms of funding that can go towards the impact we want to see. So there's tons of themes that should be touched on and explored.
I just want to offer a word of caution in that, I've seen this time and time again where tourism is being offered as the panacea for all this. And we raise expectations. There's big thoughts on whether this money is going to flow. And it's really important that if any of us are going to be involved in supporting local tourism, that business plans are thought through. What is the sustainability model? How can you then make sure that you're going to insulate yourself when things get tough? We saw countries during the pandemic, that was an extreme shock. But some of their models were predicated on having a high volume of tourism. So I think what Coral Vita is doing is really interesting, because it's a combination of education, tourism, community involvement, regeneration and restoration. So I really encourage us to think about these as not as just simply a sort of a transaction, but what are the other associated benefits that can be accrued through tourism that enhance and diversify the business model.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
I would just quickly add that I think tourism, especially when you're talking about cities, makes a key part of what the economic value add. But I think what we've been looking at particularly is really a multi-revenue approach. And so essentially we're trying to get to scale through proper marine spatial planning, a multi-user type of MPA, where certainly you have no take zones, but essentially it's open for sustainable development, as we've just discussed. But we're trying to bring in investments into like aquaculture, investments into essentially looking at and that can be offshore aquaculture, but it could also be shrimps in the mangroves and these types of structures that you can put together. And I think it's important to have, particularly when we're making large investments into ecosystems. It can be the carbon content, but carbon markets are pretty volatile and all over the place. And so we look for real asset type businesses. So essentially much more industrial and some commercial in some respects. And so it's not just ecotourism that we're looking to do.
Great. Please, Ken, we'd love to hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight as well, going back to what we were saying about tourism not being a panacea. I come from an area that is very touristy, and I just want to flag that it is something that can also become neo-colonial. And it's really, really important that when we're looking at developing tourism in these island communities, what those impacts are, that we are looking at the free and prior informed consent of our Indigenous peoples and our local communities, and we're also looking at the social impacts, because so often, and I've seen this firsthand, tourism, we're the #1 best island in the world, actually, in Palawan, voted by Condé Nast and all these very illustrious magazines. It's completely changed our way of life, how we depend on our ecosystems, how we depend on our economies. It's driven prices up, it's pushed us out of our own real estate. There's also a lot of issues that have to come in mind when big organizations want to do these kinds of tourism projects, because there is definitely ecotourism, but there's harmful ecotourism that is pro-tourist but anti-local community, and this is something that we definitely need to think about as well moving forward.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
And just quickly to say that these island communities and coastal communities are providing an enormous global public good in terms of climate adaptation. mitigation, but also biodiversity conservation, and they need greater investment, and we need to figure out a way to get that investment directly to the communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Well, we do actually have some extra time, so I would love to open the floor. If the audience, if anyone has any questions, please, we'll get a mic to you. Okay, about 2. Okay, so we have time for about 2 questions. So I'd love to hear if anyone has anything they'd like to ask or would like any of our panelists to expound on.
Well, on the last one, I would say responsible and regenerative tourism.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. It's a bit of a specific question. So I recently was living in Barbados and I did a coral reef restoration course, and I've done the coral reef farming. And I was just, and it is incremental, so I was just interested to know maybe a bit more, or maybe we could have a one-to-one conversation about your approach and how you can possibly scale up coral reef restoration.
Yeah, we'll definitely make a chance for that. Go ahead.
I'll keep it quick and happy to talk afterwards. But again, with land-based coral farms, if we have enough room, we can add more and more and more tanks to a single site to supply an entire region or even country's reefs from one location instead of an unwieldy network of underwater gardens, where if there's a spike in temperatures or a fisherman drops their anchor or there's a storm, the project could be put at risk. And also, there's a whole global field of science known as assisted evolution, lots of things still being discovered and researched, but for lack of a better term, in the land-based system, we can take the corals to the gym. So we can look at projections for future ocean temperatures, raise the temperatures in our tanks, bring them back down, stress harden the corals, promote genetic diversity along with species diversity, but we had a massive bleaching event across many places, but including the Bahamas this summer, and it sucked to see a lot of corals die, which is again why we need to solve for climate change. But while I want the stats to be much better, we saw corals that we outplanted survive while all the natural reef around us died. So it's not ever a guarantee, but using our model, again, the funding side, but more diverse, resilient, and affordable corals at scale is our approach.
Thank you. You had another question?
Well, just a quick final question. First of all, this panel is amazing. This is seriously an amazing panel. I'd love for just, if there's time, to hear you talk about velocity, because the planet doesn't live on banker's hours, and you guys are all doing such important work. What do you kind of need to go faster without messing it up, to your kind of point?
Anyone? The floor is open.
So I think one of the biggest things that we're facing right now for frontline communities who are at the forefront of ecosystem-based adaptation is access to funding. It's really that simple. It needs to be direct, it needs to be straightforward, and most importantly, it needs to be uncomplicated. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing right now from frontline communities is that there's so many pledges that are happening globally, which is so exciting that it's all going to go to frontline communities. Where do we find it? Where's the website? Where's the grant application? How do we access it? So that's the first thing. And I think secondly, intermediary organizations like One Tree Planted, like Fauna and Flora, like Rewild are so important as well. Supporting these kinds of organizations, leaning on these organizations are also really, really important, because they not only can reach those global donors, but they can also speak the language on the ground. And I actually just want to mention that Rewild and Fauna and Flora are one of our key donors. We actually established the Cleopatra's Needle Critical Habitat, which is the biggest critical habitat in the Philippines. It's 12 times the size of the city of Dubai. And we did this at a cost of $46,000 per year. We're looking at over 8 million tons of carbon, and it was so cost effective, it's cheaper than a Tesla. So, which I've seen so many of them around here. If we could just get 4 of those, I could do so many more national parks. Right. So we have the international donor community, we have these intermediary organizations, and actually we also get a lot of criticism from intermediary organizations that we have like these Russian doll financing, layers and layers and layers of organizations that are getting a cut and it's not reaching the ground. So I think it's also really important that intermediary organizations are really transparent and accountable, not to international donors, but actually to our frontline communities. Where is the money coming from and why are we spending it the way that we are? And I think that this is something that also will prevent this mistrust that we're seeing a lot from frontline organizations. And if you're inside events, you'll see lots of angry local communities and Indigenous peoples because they want to be able to access that funding and not just be the 1% of the global climate finance. And finally, sorry, one last thing. I just wanted to say that for international donors, one of the biggest issues that we face is that we are risk averse to misspending funds. And what does that mean? Minute donor reporting, stringent due diligence. And what happens for intermediary organizations is we bear down on our frontline organizations to respond to those as well. These are frontline organizations that sometimes don't have a bank account, are not incorporated, so cannot sign a donor contract. But these are the organizations, these are the communities, these are the groups, these are the women, the Indigenous communities that have been doing this kind of ecosystem-based adaptation since time immemorial. So there's so many layers there, but as a global community, we can definitely move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Just quickly say that the Sustainable Ocean Fund's fully deployed. So basically, and we're in SMEs and startups. And we're basically looking to do round 2. So we're happy to do more on the ground as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, two really quick points, things I would take away. When I arrived at this organization in July, I told everyone in the organization, stop talking to me about innovation. Come to me with practical and rational solutions to address finance, point 1. Second point, my message to all the donors, and I apologize if you're out there, put on some big person pants. Seriously. You know, I am tired of these discussions that go on for a year, 2 years, and we know what's happening in those 2 years. So the point there is, exactly to your point, we have a 95 to 100% certainty of the impact and the things that need to happen. All of our people on the ground are operating at maybe 60, 65% confidence levels, but they're getting it right and they're learning by doing. So please go out and encourage your donors to take more risk. You have great expertise on the ground, and we can achieve it much faster. Time is of the essence.
Thank you.
Echoing all of that and amplifying it, more early stage capital, the $50 million, $500 million awards are amazing, but there's a lot of small projects, community groups, early stage that need the $50,000, the $500,000 checks so they can get to the bigger ones. And also, for many reasons, but it was tough to work in the NGO space and donors because they don't want to see their money go to overhead. And that needs to get figured out because people shouldn't starve because you want to see 10,000 trees planted, but if you can't pay people to do the job, that needs to change in the philanthropy and donor community.
Thank you. Woo. Thank you so much to this incredible panel. I'm a bit biased when I say this was like the best panel of the day because I'm here, but thank you all so much for your incredible words of wisdom and insight. I know many of you are going to want to speak to our panelists afterwards. Please feel free. I will be trying to organize to speak with you all for part 2 from Island Innovation. I'd love to write all about your projects and highlight them as much as we can. So thanks once again, everyone.